Congratulations, stepdaughter. What a blessing this is for you.
I was curious, and Joe, maybe you can tell me a little bit about this. Like, it seemed like Alicent, was she more hurt that Rhaenyra lied? Or was it more that she now understood the level of duplicity that was sort of happening around her? Like, is she still hanging on to this idea that the two of them are friends? Or is it more that like, oh, what my dad said is true. All this shit is happening in secret passageways. Not only did she probably like still go out with Daemon, but then she came home and hooked up with her Kingsguard, like her bodyguard. And everything that I think in my sort of innocent nail-biting eyes is like a lie. And like this place is like full of vipers.
I think that's part of it. And it's part of, I mean, I think Otto really set the table for her there when he left.
When he married her
without
off
a carriage
to
in
an
the
old
rain.
man.
No, but like when he left, he said, he basically laid it out to her that this was her fault.
Right.
And that in choosing Rhaenyra over him, is the way he puts it, she is directly responsible for him leaving and therefore directly responsible for placing herself at the palace all alone. She already mentioned last week that like she feels like she has no friends. People just see her as the queen more than anything else. As bad as her father was to her, he was an ally that she could rely upon, and he's gone. And then here comes my favorite, Larys Strong, up to her, whispering in her ear.
Can't wait to talk about this guy.
Okay.
I mean, I cannot wait.
But like he's underlining that aloneness to her and underlining this idea that like a game, both Otto and Larys, basically there's a game going on and you're not even playing it at all. And it's going on around you. And even Rhaenyra, who we've seen for years, Alicent has been defending Rhaenyra, both to Rhaenyra's face and while Rhaenyra is not there. And for Rhaenyra to lie to her, to swear, as we talked last week, on her mother's memory.
Yeah.
And lie to her. So there's like hurt and betrayal is in there. But I think also just this idea of like, okay, grow up, Alicent.
Yes.
Now's the time to like get smart. What do you think, Mel?
Yeah, I agree. I think all of these different threads fall into this tapestry of loss of innocence, right? And moving into this, but we heard the showrunners talk, I believe it was the end of episode 3, about how that was like the childhood's end episode for multiple characters, Alicent, Rhaenyra, Daemon. I think really this is the end of that for Alicent, or it's where she accepts and acknowledges and recognizes that truth and then moves forward and really grasps that agency. I think that we talked a lot last week, and so I won't rehash it here, but I think that Alicent's views on like what she sincerely would think of Rhaenyra coupling with Daemon at a brothel or Rhaenyra sleeping with Kristen, I think she genuinely would not approve of that.
Yeah.
I think that the thing that though ultimately is the nail in the coffin here of their friendship is the lie, because that cements for Alicent not only that she was being used, but that other people think they can use her, that they know they can lie to her and deceive her and make her a pawn in their game. And that if she doesn't want that to be true, she has to change that for herself. And so even in exchange, like I thought the conversation that she had with Hobart Hightower was so fascinating, because she thanks him for coming. And the first thing that he says is, I was worried that given leave of your father's shadow, you might wither in King's Landing's sun. And I was like, what's up with this guy? This is a pretty weird thing and a very insulting thing to say to somebody. But that's, again, another acknowledgement of this very clear and visible reality that pretty much everyone sees about Alicent's circumstance. And so then the fact that the next thing he says to her is, but you stood tall.
Yeah.
Know that Old Town stands with you. Like, that's an important thing, that she has made a decision to say, okay, and we talked so much about the dress choices earlier in the season, and I know we talked about it already in this episode, but I think we have to say one more thing, which is tracking the progression. Because now I look back on all of our jokes about why is she in this one dress, and it's like she starts in this pale blue, right? This very innocent, childlike color. And she moves into wearing her mother's old gown on her father's orders. And then she spends multiple episodes in the colors of somebody else's house. House Targaryen red, House Targaryen black. The drapery of this marriage that she was ultimately guided guided into by somebody else's hand. And so moving into House Hightower's color of her own volition, when she is choosing not to go check on the king, not to go spend time with him, interrupting his speech, drawing all eyes to her. Like, I don't think we can overstate the significance of what
Mal,
that
I think that's
represents.
a crucial way of like watching the show. Is that like, I think for me, honestly, it's been a little bit of getting my head around like what this show is doing rather than what it's not doing in relationship to Thrones. And this is way more of like a comedy and tragedy of manners in royalty, rather than here are these people, these sort of these castaways in the world who will eventually rise and like lead it to its salvation. You know, it's like much more about these very, very, very highborn, you know, people who are following all these like social graces and breaking them at times, and, you know, sometimes quite violently. But I think it's easier now that like I've kind of seen these 5 episodes to kind of get my head around like what at least this version of the show is doing. It could change as like that new actors come in and everything, but it's kind of an interesting lens to watch the show through.
To hear more from this conversation, follow the Ringerverse on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts.